But essentially, like where we're at today is that now we have this problem where without some kind of massive success, like
Mm-hmm.
there's not going to be any more capital injection into the company.
Mm.
But what happens to Open Bazaar as that goes forward, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like the last like 9 months, 10 months have been tons and tons of trips looking for VC funding that wasn't happening. We went through a couple like very close to acquisitions of the business. And then we've kind of just been like existing, trying to figure out what would be the path forward. And now we're getting to that point where like even the donations and stuff that we've received over the years, which is like six figures, have started to kind of dwindle down. And that's where what kind of led to the notice was that we can't hide our heads in the sand. We have to figure out like what happens to Open Bazaar as we kind of move into this new world.
This episode is sponsored by NordVPN. I've been using NordVPN for years since it doesn't log your data, has over 5,300 super fast servers in 59 countries, and I can pay in my favorite cryptocurrency, Dash, which is important since I'm unbanked. Take back your online privacy. Sign up now with the promo code DCN and get 68% off, or just $3.71 per month, plus an additional month free. Go to nordvpn.org/DCN or use the coupon code DCN. So, hey everyone, I have the fantastic pleasure today of speaking with Brian Hoffman, CEO of OB1, the main development group that has been working on OpenBazaar and other projects. How's it going, man?
Very good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. So to recap things for users who might have, stayed off of Twitter recently, which, honestly, it's a great mental self-defense tool right now to sort of stay off that. But basically, OpenBazaar, which is, a decentralized peer-to-peer marketplace, had got a lot of attention, a lot of hype, a lot of, basically was on the scene a few years ago. And then all of a sudden, to a lot of people's minds, there was an announcement of having to shut down a few services, not being able to maintain some of the key infrastructure anymore. And then people absolutely kind of got really sad. And then a lot of people, it seemed like there was a flood of donations. I didn't, fine tooth comb go through all the single addresses, but it looked like you got a little bit of amount. And then apparently infrastructure costs are covered for the rest of the year. And that kind of gives it's kind of like it kind of reminds me a little bit of the purse situation, where purse was, one of the favorite things in the community. And then for whatever reason, which, there's a lot of behind the scenes reasons, I guess, we're going to cease operations. And then next week they were just, oh, well, never mind, we're back online, and and so I think a lot of people might be, confused as to what happened, and it'd be a great time to explore this sort of issue. And, because OpenBazaar is one of the most exciting projects that people would always mention when they're saying about, like, this is the great thing about Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. This is like use case number one. So in kind of like in a quick recap, what happened?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is one of those classic cases where you have like an open source project that kind of existed before the venture backed business kind of came along and sort of kind of mucked things up a little bit, because um, you know our line of thinking always was, from the beginning, was like, we started the project, it started to get a lot of momentum, interest, and like it was growing, and we wanted to keep that going, and we wanted to kind of shift from doing like whatever we were doing before that, and then this is a side project to kind of like flipping that, right, like to do making this our full-time work. And so there weren't a lot of like options back then, which ended up leading into the venture capital backed rounds that we did for OB1. One of the things that we worried about, and kind of did become true, was that the business wasn't really, it was more of like we were building OpenBazaar. We weren't really like building a solid business behind it. We were hoping that at some point we'd find a way to incentivize people to use it that would reward us, and we would have services on top of that. But we ended up spending 150% of our energy just trying to get the network up and growing. And there were a lot of things over the years that kind of like hindered that progress. We've talked before, and like you hinted at like the SegWit 2x kind of controversy and some of those things, and everything else that was happening in crypto. But essentially, like where we're at today is that now we have this problem where it's clear that like without some kind of massive uh, success, like
Mm-hmm.
there's not going to be any more capital injection into the company.
Mm.
But what happens to Open Bazaar as that goes forward, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like the last like 9 months, 10 months have been, you know, tons and tons of trips looking for VC funding that wasn't happening. We went through a couple like very close to acquisitions of the business
Mm-hmm.
that failed. And then we've kind of just been like existing, trying to figure out what would be the path forward. And now we're getting to that point where like even the donations and stuff that we've received over the years, which is like six figures, have started to kind of dwindle down. And that's where what kind of led to the notice was that we can't hide our heads in the sand. We have to figure out like what happens to Open Bazaar as we kind of move into this new world.
Mm-hmm.
And we want to make it more community driven. And so the
Mm.
first thing to do is to say, you know, what do you guys want to see happen, and are you going to be able to put forth the energy and the capital to help us like do that and move it in that direction? And we have seen numerous donations, not necessarily
Mm-hmm.
a lot of donations. I think right now we've only raised like $3,000, which is not even enough
Mm.
for like the month's expenses for the services and stuff. And but we did receive some serious support that would guarantee us going through the end of the year at least, which is good. It gives us some more time, but it certainly is coming very quickly before the end of the year. And we want to make sure that there's like a solid direction and interest in that as well, because Obi-Wan does do most of the development. And if, say, tomorrow Obi-Wan ceases to exist, like, is there still developer interest once most of the devs are not being paid full time or whatever to work on it, et cetera, et cetera? So that's kind of the world we're preparing for.
Yeah, it seems like the more pressing concern than development, although it is a concern, is infrastructure. And so, for people to sort of understand how this works, how does OpenBazaar's infrastructure work, and why do you guys need to pay for it? Sort of.
Yeah, that's a great question. A lot of people are like, "What is this? It's a decentralized app. Like, why is there even any infrastructure costs to begin with?"
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, we run a bunch of different services, and some can probably be lowered in cost, and some could probably be removed altogether. But at the current state, the big bulk of the costs are when we went to OpenBazaar 2.0,
Mm-hmm.
we shifted from having an SPV wallet model
Mm-hmm.
to API wallet. Part of the impetus for that was that we wanted to get onto the web eventually and onto mobile, which we did with Haven. It's just having multiple SPV wallets running on the same app
Mm-hmm.
alongside OpenBazaar running in the background. It just wasn't feasible in our understanding. So we went to an API model. And so a lot of the costs are like having, we use Blockbook, which is like
Mm-hmm.
Trezor's Explorer and
Yeah.
Indexer. And we run one for Zcash,
Mm-hmm.
Bitcoin Cash, Litecoin, Bitcoin. We don't run one for ETH, but we pay for Infura.
Mm-hmm.
And so, those kinds of things, they're pretty expensive, actually. I mean, they're like expensive servers to maintain. It's probably $4,000 or $5,000 right there just to manage those, to keep them in sync. And that's, with like backup and redundancy and making sure that they don't, if they go down, people don't lose money and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
That's a bulk of it. And then we also have the search engine that we maintain, which runs Elasticsearch, it runs Amazon services, it's constantly crawling the network and providing search capabilities to users, which most people might not understand what that even means. But every time you search on OpenBazaar, you hit our search service
Mm-hmm.
generally. And then if you go to openbazaar.com, that all hits our services as well for search and discovery and all that. So that's a lot of data being served up and things. So those are the two primary big costs. Um, Someone could stand it, come in and serve as the search engine piece of it, because we have like a standard specification and you can
Yeah.
use whatever search engine you want, but like people have to pay and do that and manage it. So that's a challenge. It's almost easier for us to just solicit donations from the community and try and keep running that thing as efficiently as we can. And as far as the API wallets are concerned, um, we do support SPV mode for Bitcoin only, and
Mm-hmm.
you can even run it with a full node if you want to run a full node on it. But that basically that leaves out the mobile wallet. It leaves out other coins, so it doesn't become a very good experience, we'll say.
Yeah, I mean that's understandable. So you talked about starting from like an open source project and then hitting a VC phase, and then now kind of being stuck in the middle. So, what was the original prospect behind OpenBazaar development before VC came in? Was it just a bunch of people working on it, on their off time or whatever, and then money came in, or is there a little bit more nuance to the story?
So we worked on it, I guess I'm trying to think. So we started in April of 2014, and we didn't start talking about investment until probably November or December. It was just like kind of like conversations we had with investors because we knew we wanted to raise money in some way. We were definitely not leaning towards starting a company because I mean, we all had comfortable jobs. We were like families, we weren't really looking to like blow it all up and start a startup. But we started having more conversations with the guys at Union Square Ventures and Andreessen Horowitz, and they were like, if you guys think that you could build something on top of this, like we really believe in decentralized applications. We'd love to see like something kind of come and disrupt the e-commerce model using crypto. It's really fascinating to them. And so for them at the time, I think it was a pretty big gamble in terms of like they didn't know where crypto was going, but they wanted to kind of at least be participatory in like helping whatever might succeed. And so they looked probably across the landscape and saw we were kind of the leading thing in that area, and that was the horse to back at the time. And I don't know if you remember. I mean, we were pretty popular back then. I mean, I have an award over here on the thing from
Yeah,
2015 that said, best app of the year or
I've
whatever.
seen that
But
OpenBazaar sticker on countless laptops across the world, like
yeah,
over the last few years. Yeah.
yeah. So it was a pretty big high for us. But I think we didn't really fully understand either that at some point, it was going to come to call like, what's the business model? What is the revenue model? What's that doing? Because smaller investors are willing to take risks like that because they get a lot more equity. They're upfront. It's less cost. But as we started getting towards like our Series B raise, those kinds of investors were like, well, this is risky as hell. You guys, could be like illegal stuff going on. We have, there's no business model. Like there's not a lot of revenue coming in for this and that. Like they kind of judged it under a traditional lens. Um, and obviously like our reticence to do a token also is kind of like, a lot of these investment funds are not super crypto savvy. Some of them didn't even have any crypto investments, and they're like hearing all this stuff about tokens, and we're sitting here saying, "Oh yeah, we're never doing a token," et cetera, et cetera. It's
Yeah, they don't get it.
like what's wrong with these guys? Is kind of the response you get. So it was a difficult road to hoe for sure.
Yeah, so that kind of brings to the whole sustainability model. Now, there might be a little bit of a difference between ROI for an investor, like someone's, let's put money into this company and can we get money back out of it eventually? There might be a hair split between that and just any self-running system. Like for example, you have something like say Bitcoin that mining runs it basically.
Hmm.
You get transaction fees and then inflation through the block reward that pays for people to run most of the infrastructure. Of course, not all of it, but enough of it, right? It continues in perpetuity by you inject users in and it sort of self sustains. Obviously glassing over a whole lot of details for like,
Yeah.
but and so what is there any kind of a sustainability model in the OpenBazaar architecture, or is there a plan, or do you have any ideas for it? But basically, if this became wildly successful next year, where everyone is using it, you were pumping through like, 150,000 plus purchases a day through the ecosystem, and would that translate to more resources to actually maintain that architecture? And like, if not, how does that basically square up?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously if people are making a ton of money on the platform, like say it blows up and they're you'd like to think that like the people that are benefiting the most would be willing to contribute back to the project. And in fact, when we first started, I mean, we got the bulk of our original six figures of donations. I mean, it wasn't that high at the time, but since then it's gone up. But the bulk of those donations came early on when people were very excited and they were like working on it and they wanted it to happen and everything. And so I think that might have led to much more sustainable donation based success. I mean, you also have things like BTC Pay server who's getting grants from people like Square and stuff like that that are sustaining those projects.
Mm-hmm.
But really, the only other option, well, you have a couple options, but the big one would just be to inject some kind of fee at some point to like, give back to the developers or foster the community. Something that we've always wanted to avoid. We wanted everything
Mm-hmm.
to be free. Um, I think if it came down to the fact that like it only would succeed if we implemented something like that, and the users were amenable to having that injected into the process, we could do that. Um, one thing that we always were hesitant about in terms of that is that we always felt like somebody could just fork us and just take away the fee and
Yeah.
do their own thing. So it wasn't really like very defensible in our eyes. We kind of wanted to create an incentive for people to like contribute, not like force them as like a middleman to kind of like pay a a gate charge.
Yeah, now that's interesting with the forking, of course, because no one wants to pay a fee, but then you fork it and have a free version, but then there's on the hook for all this infrastructure that then they
That's
gotta pay.
true.
So at some point
Yep.
you gotta find a little bit of way to make money, and I'm trying to think because obviously, like the whole open source world, despite being having being in it, everything, I use Linux, I use just anything else that's free open source software. All my I'm using open broadcast software to record this thing right now. Like I use GIMP to do my editing, so I don't have Photoshop. Like I do everything that way, but still, like I kind of how that ends up working is still something that I think a lot of people find a little bit of mystery in. Is how do you maintain open source kind of projects that are completely free, FOSS projects? How do they get actually maintained? And like for example, I guess the biggest way you could kind of see that is something like Wikipedia, where it's just absolutely free, everyone uses it, but at one point, at every year or so, you see Jimmy Whale's little face on there and says, "Hey, give me $5, and then enough people we can have this over." And that kind of model, I guess it works because Wikipedia is still there; it's still working great. And so, do you think that this is something that can survive under a purely free open source software kind of a model with all this infrastructure? Like, do you just hit people up for donations in app or something at some point, and then it could possibly work if there's enough users, or do you need some sort of a hybrid type model?
Well, I think, I mean, part of the reason why we implemented some of this infrastructure is to make it really user friendly and like
Mm-hmm.
easy for anybody to use OpenBazaar. I mean, one option that we've tossed around is like maybe scaling back that focus on user experience and saying like, okay, this is a tool that like crypto people that want to use it are going to do. And so maybe we put the burden on them to run some of these services, like maybe some kind of containerized service that they can run on their own machine that provides the indexer or like or maybe does the search engine for them, where we could like basically go down to like bare bones costs as far as centralized infrastructure goes. But that removes part of the target audience for sure. I mean, it does.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a preferable path forward for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like if you could, it obviously, I'm in this world, but I'm also in like the normie world. And at some point, like Etsy is great. You just use Etsy, it works. And if people could use Etsy, that they could buy stuff cheaper or that they couldn't buy off of Etsy, and it just sort of works. That's a great use case. Of course, that's where you have like the two worlds that are like wildly apart. We have like all the
Mhm.
guts of the infrastructure here, and then you have like a very polished, you know, end result on this side. And you're trying to get to where it's like a compelling reason to switch. And sometimes, like as you said before, like crypto people don't really care that much about UX, like not as much. And so you can kind of have bare bones architecture and still get those people. But if you want like more people than random crypto people, you'd want to get all the way on this side. So, what kind of usability infrastructure do you need to make this more palpable to the average person?
Well, I mean, like I said, I mean, you really need good discovery experience, which
Mm-hmm.
I think people tend to take it for granted that Amazon does a lot of this stuff, right? Like you don't, it's not just about like putting, a website together where people can list an item for sale and then like
Mm-hmm.
people just find it. I mean, they're constantly building algorithms to suggest things based on your history and what's hot and watching what's going on, depending on who you are and where you are. I mean, that kind of stuff is not, that's not just, you don't just write an algorithm real quick and then pump it out to everybody and they just get it. It's like something that has to be continuously developed and iterated upon, and those services are like built to do that. And so if you want to be compared to something like that, you have to be able to provide that as an option. So, the OB1 search services that we provide, I mean, we have like trending stores, we have ranking algorithms within our code, that knows what people are like kind of searching for and things like that. What are new listings, what's popping up. We have things that have to filter out horrible stuff in order for our stuff to be on the app stores, which was like a
Yeah.
whole nother challenge for us. So, I mean, I think we always wanted to build something that anybody could be excited about and feel like they're using some centralized app, and not having to burden them on things like running full nodes. Like
Yeah.
there are a couple other, I don't know if it's Particle or one of the other ones, but like, you have to wait for like whatever for the whole blockchain to sync before you can use the app. And then, like with BTC Pay server, you have to run your own server. And even though it's easy, it's still something that the user has to maintain. And if you're just selling some crafts that you make or the t-shirt or something, it's not like something you're going to want to do, right?
Yeah.
Necessarily. So we wanted to be squarely in that like really easy to use, like, and hopefully people would think of like it as a great alternative to like selling on Etsy or like eBay or Amazon or wherever.
Yeah, I'm almost wondering if the path might be to get a few major retailers on board to just use that as infrastructure so they don't have to, and then just integrate it into their website. And then at that point, it becomes big enough that enough big players could just say, oh, I'm willing to donate some of my revenue to support this kind of infrastructure. It's like things run on OpenBazaar rather than OpenBazaar being like a completely separate spot that people go to.
Yeah, I mean that's something that we kind of thought might happen early on too, and over the years we've tried to figure out how we could maybe do that, because obviously the idea of having like a really large person with large audience on board onto the platform would be like a huge boon to like the growth of it. The biggest issue though is that these guys are not immature players, right? Like they have so many different integrations into like shipping and logistics systems and marketing and advertising and all these things, right? That they tie these systems together in order to like do their business. And with Open Bazaar, it's pretty like simplistic in in that respect, right? Like it doesn't tie into those things. It could at some point, but it hasn't evolved technically to that yet. Like the focus has mostly just been on like how do we kind of emulate some of the core things about e-commerce in a decentralized protocol, because it operates in a completely different way. There's different challenges. It's not just a website stood up with like an API that other people can just tap into.
Yeah, so that reminds me of one of my favorite projects these days, LBRY. I don't know how much you paid attention to it back in the day, but it's been around for 4 or so years, and it is a decentralized content protocol where probably a lot of people are actually going to be watching this. And I remember I did some work for them back in 2016, and then I went off to other things. And over the years, like I downloaded the client and it just crashed, and I didn't figure out. I just I didn't ever used it because it just from an average user perspective, it just kind of sucked. And then at the end of last year, they debuted like a web portal type thing, basically like a YouTube, and now they have a different one called Odyssey that basically looks and quacks like a duck. Like it looks just like YouTube, like pretty much. It works really well. It just and other LBRY.TV, the one that came before that, was I believe up to like over 4 million visitors a month in August, and so like you can just see like the exponential growth from something that people just go to a website and use, and they managed to get a lot of new content creators because of the actual unique selling proposition, which is censorship. People are getting banned and demonetized, and I think it's a little bit of a prime real estate position as far as the decentralization race is concerned, because YouTube is the worst. Like how many people's banks are cutting them off and stuff. Some, not a lot, but like everyone's getting demonetized, everyone's getting throttled, everyone's getting censored on YouTube. Some people on Twitter, a lot on YouTube. Now, if you're thinking of that kind of a thing, if I was thinking of like the LBRY version for like LBRY commerce, like like Open Bazaar type thing, where I could just go to a website like Etsy. It kind of performs like Etsy, and I sell things and buy things, and it works with crypto, which is also a big barrier that LBRY doesn't really have because you don't need LBRY tokens to actually you watch a lot of videos. Some people paywall things, but it's
Mhm.
like a lot of the user experience does not need that. Now, in order to just do it, there has to be some like easy in to crypto, and of course you'd only get crypto people. But that kind of thing might be a nice way of like a first step at least when people get kicked off of Etsy for whatever, or get kicked off of Amazon, or which I have no visibility to that kind of world. Is that a problem you hear a lot of people talking about? Like, man, I got censored from this.
I mean, I wouldn't say that a lot of people are censored on commerce platforms. I mean, there's
Mm-hmm.
obviously a few that have come in and they're like, "Oh, I had troubles, and that's why I'm here."
Mm-hmm.
And some of them are probably deserve to get kicked off those
Yeah, of
platforms, to be
course.
honest. But I mean, I think the majority of the people that come there are looking for an alternative channel to sell their goods because either A, they're not doing well on other platforms, or they're expensive and their margins
Yeah.
are low. But usually they're looking for another audience, and they like think that maybe the crypto audience would be the target for some of these things.
Yeah, and I guess
Um,
in some cases they might have been mistaken in that way,
yeah,
which
yeah,
sort
that's
of
true.
reminds me of, I'm one of those crazy people that lives without a bank account off crypto and have for the last 4 years. But I'm like, it's me and like two other guys, and that's it. And
Yeah.
I rem- it seems like pretty much no one uses crypto to buy stuff. Like, I mean, obviously some people do, but it's pretty limited. First off, has that been your perspective as well? Have you noticed that as well, that there just isn't a huge group of people yet who are trying to spend crypto every day?
I mean, I think that the people that are spending it each day, and I don't know what your experience is, but like
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people are really just trying to like, they still want to consume services that maybe only are obtainable through fiat purchasing, and
Mm-hmm.
they're moving between those, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
so things like Bitrefill, where
Mm-hmm.
you can basically like buy anything with crypto by getting gift cards and things. Like those kinds of things do really well on OpenBazaar because it's obvious why people want
Mm-hmm.
those. You got like an anonymous place to offload your crypto to fiat, basically,
Mm-hmm.
and that's understandable. But like in terms of day to day purchasing, you're right. I mean, fees are kind of crazy in certain things. I mean, ETH was like doing pretty well for a while, and then fees went up, and just like what we saw back in SegWit 2x times when the Bitcoin fees shot up, people stop buying things as much, or
Mm-hmm.
the purchases are much larger so that they can offset those fee costs. So that's always been a problem. But I mean, your your um your comment about how library started making like some really solid web based tools. That's
Mm-hmm.
that's something that we've always wished we could get to, and we've tried to. And I think that the technology is kind of there, but we're not really like. I think a lot of the web based dApps are kind of like Web3 style apps
Mm-hmm.
where they're just thin clients and the logic is all somewhere on a blockchain, and they're just kind of doing that whole dance.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really, I mean, from a user experience perspective, I mean, I know that sometimes there's like MetaMask and all that complexity, but in terms of just having a website you go to, there's no download, there's
Mm-hmm.
no installing, there's no configuration. You don't have to think about what operating system you're on, and you just use it. That's like a really great user experience. We would love to have that. Like right now, we just have a desktop app and we have a mobile app, but
Mm-hmm.
way more people like the mobile app, and we've got way more people downloading the mobile app than the desktop app. It's just like hands down, people want to use the mobile app more, and it's not even that great of an experience for merchants because it's hard to manage like storefronts and things like that on a
Mm-hmm.
little mobile device.
Yeah.
Um, but that's what people want to do. They want to use their phone and they want to use the browser for the most part. So
Yeah, just the whole desktop client thing is like a big problem for a lot of people. I mean, there's a few things that I use on like a desktop client, whether it's, my little Signal messenger or Discord, or, so I do have the whole library one just because it has some extra transcoding features that the web thing doesn't. But like, for the most part, most people, that is accurate. Most people don't want to use the one way that it's easy. It's the one way that most people have been able to use OpenBazaar.
mhm.
And have you thought of like an easy little web portal type thing for a merchant to set up their account, and that just goes through the mobile, so then basically they can just manage their storefront through like a proxy?
Well, we actually I don't know how much you followed us
Mm-hmm.
as a product and company, but I mean, earlier in the year, like I was saying, when we were going through some of these acquisition talks and stuff, we kind of ended up having to like halt some stuff and like, you know, that's not like a simple process. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you have to basically like, take off your clothes and let everybody see what's going on,
Yeah.
during an acquisition. So things just kind of halt. And we wasted a lot of time in that. And then once we got out of that, we had to downsize. And so
Mm-hmm.
we lost a bunch of people off the team that we really wish we didn't have to. But some of those folks were working on a web-based version. So we were
Mm-hmm.
trying to port all this stuff over to a JavaScript version of IPFS. So allow us to do like a web browser version, and we were making good progress, but we've had to halt that just because we only at this point we're 5 people, so like it's pretty like bare bones the team, and
Mm-hmm.
so right now we're mostly just focused on like keeping the infrastructure running and like fixing bugs here and there and helping people and like kind of deciding where we want to go and planning for whatever happens next. So
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, the whole Segwit 2x thing, and this is one of those things where, for people who are in deep into the cryptoverse, kind of saw a lot of this stuff, but it is a very strange aspect of this industry that we're in. Is I remember, of course, things are simpler in the Bitcoin only days when just everyone was doing everything on Bitcoin. There was a few other coins that existed, but no one really cared. They were kind of little fun experiments, hobbies on the side. And then at some point, the scaling debate hit, and it just became an all-out sort of like holy war. And I do know that there was a key segment of the group of businesses that just did not want to get in bigger blocks, a bigger small block kind of area, and basically just want to hey everyone chill out, let's just move forward for now, let's make everyone happy, let's just not disrupt anything, and just kind of said, what about this too, why don't we make everyone happy, just make a small block size increase and implement this SegWit thing, and then everyone will be happy. And then it's turned out that that compromise ended up being probably more controversial, or at least on some, or more attacked, let's just say, than just one or the other kind of side. And so I do remember, watching your tweets and just seeing like, oh, why don't we kind of just like, it wasn't even anything aggressive that I can remember. It was just, why not this? And all of a sudden, flame wars, attacks, all this kind of stuff. So first off, what happened through your perspective on that?
well, I mean, so you have to look at like what people's incentives are
Mm-hmm.
when these kinds of arguments happen. For us, you're looking at a project that is VC backed. It's so we have VCs and investors and other people breathing down our necks, telling us what they think. Other companies. I mean, we
Mm-hmm.
were close to like BitPay and Coinbase and some of these others, and then you have we built a marketplace which is like completely predicated on being able to like transact in coins,
Of
and so
course.
and the majority of our purchases that we see on the marketplace are like under $100, which means any kind of exorbitant fee makes that just infeasible. It
Yeah.
makes the product unusable. So for us, we really just wanted some kind of quick and smart and reasonable, pragmatic solution to move forward and try and like advance the conversation. So that's kind of where we came from. Um, I think part of this whole thing too is that I think when like when Blockstream came along, I think they kind of overhyped and overpromised the side chains piece of the discussion,
Mm-hmm.
and so that I think a lot of people felt like, well, why are we going to make this permanent or semi-permanent block size change when this amazing sidechain technology is coming along pretty soon, and we'll just hop over there and everybody will be happy. And then then the next part of that was lightning, and that'll be here any day.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people were skeptical. From our side, we thought a reasonable choice to make as a community, as a Bitcoin community, not just
Mm-hmm.
as corporate or big, small blockers or whatever, would be to just come up with some kind of plan to mitigate this in the near term, so that at least companies and products can continue to grow and not just be like stuck.
Yeah.
Because projects like ours were pretty popular and people liked it, and we were just getting inundated with emails like, this is unusable, like why would you do this, like you guys need to take all these other coins, and like we didn't want to
Mm-hmm.
take other coins. We didn't want to have to, because we didn't have the ability. We didn't have an API wallet at that time. We couldn't just
Mm-hmm.
spin up another server and take a new coin on. So it was a lot of work to be involved with that. And unfortunately, that's where we ended up going. We spent a lot of time focusing on building a multiple currency wallet when we could have been focusing on Bitcoin improvements, but the cost just like made our use case like irrelevant. And many people don't care. Many people didn't care. They're like, so what? If
Mm-hmm.
OpenBazaar dies because of the fees, that's the way Bitcoin works. Tough shit. That was kind of
Yeah.
the feedback we got. And then that's why we got hammered so hard. It's just like, well, you guys are crying and you're willing to sacrifice the sanctity of the blockchain in order to just further
Mm-hmm.
your VC backed business, is kind of how it was portrayed.
Yeah. So
So,
that seems like, I mean, obviously, uh, in a completely decentralized system and community across the whole world, it's hard to really tell what everyone's doing and what has changed. It seems like it doesn't seem like the amount of people spending Bitcoin definitely has gone down. Like as far as like buying small things, that's definitely gone almost completely away. Some of it has gone on to other projects, but it seems like a lot of just the people trying to spend crypto thing kind of died off with the blocks size issue. Is that been sort of a? I mean, you have more data on this because it goes through your business, right? Is this something you kind of observed as well?
I mean, I wouldn't say that it actually like sharply declined or anything. I mean, it's been pretty steady, the amount of people that are interested in doing it, but
Mm-hmm.
it certainly did not increase exponentially with the amount of visibility and the price and everything else that you would think would correlate as an upward,
Yeah.
like it would all go together, not like what we're seeing on, centralized exchanges and those kinds of things. Obviously the businesses that are making money on trading and like trying to make money, those are killing it right now, right? Like they've definitely correlated. So it definitely is just more of like a very steady of like there's these group of people in crypto that like to spend it, and that's not growing. It's not necessarily
Mm-hmm.
shrinking, but it's not growing. And other projects, like Origin, which is on ETH,
Mm-hmm.
they, I think they're even pivoting kind of and moving to some of these other like D shop projects and not really focusing so much on just like peer to peer commerce because it isn't growing. It's not a very promising segment, whether you believe it's needed or not. Now, you could argue that there's a lot of other reasons why that's happening. It's not just that crypto's not made for that.
Mm-hmm.
None of these experiences are all super solid. I mean, even OpenBazaar after 5 years is still has issues every once in a while, and people complain about this or that because it's not centrally managed. If you have
Mm-hmm.
a problem with your sale, you kind of have to deal with that in a peer-to-peer fashion. So that still is not like at parity with what you get on regular websites when you purchase things.
Yeah, that's one thing I definitely noticed is it's when as soon as you try to make something decentralized in some way, something relatively trustless, you start to see all the reasons why trust exists to begin with. And for example, the whole refund policy thing where you don't have a centralized arbitrator come in is one of those things that I've just seems pretty terrible as far as like a UX kind of thing. At least you have a company like Purse and someone has an issue, the company just says, "Oh no, they were right," and then they just sort of solve it that way. But in a completely decentralized way. So let me give the example of I used Bisq. You know Bisq, I'm sure, right?
Hmm.
I used them once or twice just to like try it out, and I had basically like a headache for 3 days afterwards. It was just a nightmare to use, and it's one of those on paper projects I really believe in. I think this is a fantastic idea, but just setting up a trade and then you have to deposit a certain amount, and then you got like a little fee. And sorry about that. I missed a big explosive sneeze that almost came out. But just the fact you have to deposit and there's like a fee that comes with this. You have to sometimes deposit more than you're trying to even sell, and it's like what if, just all this nonsense. Is there a way of making that component of this whole peer-to-peer world any smoother? So, for example, is there a way to start basically building a reputation system around some of the more seamlessly transacting businesses, and then people can do an opt out of whole weird escrow kind of a thing and just kind of like buy like they would on Amazon.
I think this is kind of hitting at the crux of the issue that we had as a project, which was that, when we started, we were looking at a very challenging problem and trying to figure out like what's the real science behind it, like what's the best way to do this. And we didn't really have the pressure of like, oh, you also have to build a business on top of this science experiment that you have,
Yeah, of
which is
course.
essentially what's happening, right? Like we're building this airplane as we're flying it, and we have to like, we're expected to like build solid business model on top of it and have it all figured out and be able to scale it up very quickly and pour VC money on it and just like explode and then go public and everybody's happy. Like it made us have to drop a lot of the things that made us like super unique early on, where, early on we had one guy who was working with us, Dionysus, who he was like a researcher essentially, who was like looking at reputation systems. He wrote his master's thesis on it, like how it would happen in OpenBazaar with like web of trust and all these things that we might have been willing to explore into because we didn't care about having to like quickly getting people onto the platform or like make money or whatever that those other motivations would be. We kind of set those aside, and I think that first for this problem to be solved, like what you're saying is like how do we make it like more seamless? Well, the short term problem would be like how we tackled it, which is like, okay, let's say moderation. We have verified moderators. So OB1, talks to like our most popular moderators. We vet them. We make sure they're responsive. We like kind of foster the good communication, and that improves the ability for that. But it's a centralized solution, or we come up with the search engine, which is like another centralized solution for the hard problem, which is peer-to-peer search. Um, Whereas if we were just open source, maybe we would have just been working more on like experimental search protocols and having people contribute to that, and then trying to implement it in a more decentralized fashion with a better user experience. But it depends on what your time horizon is, really, because I think things like decentralized search and potentially good moderation between anonymous people, those kinds of things, they take a lot more thought to make it work properly. Like, obviously like mutually assured destruction, like
Of
the
course.
putting more in than you plan to sell or whatever, in term, to create this like standoff so that you don't want to lose your money. I mean, that's like the worst freaking user experience ever. Like why would you, like, if you're selling a bike, why do you expect somebody to put in more than the cost of the bike in order to like sell the bike and get the money back? Like, to
Yeah.
me, that's just awful. But it does what is accomplished, right? Like if you pull the lever in terms of like functionality, yeah, it probably incentivizes people more to like not lose their money to do it. It's just it pulls the user experience lever in the complete wrong direction. So there's all these trade-offs, and I don't think we've quite gotten to the point where we have like a sound economic way to like solve that problem that we can just implement in software. It just doesn't exist yet.
Yeah, and that kind of hits to the center of what I think people are learning a lot of times the hard way with this whole decentralized world is the idea of centralized training wheels and progressive decentralization is in if you want anyone to use it, you have to sort of make upfront compromises that you get rid of over time, which a lot of people don't like because for very good reasons, which is what if
You
it
might
never
never revisit
changes?
it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It just works like that. And Bitcoin seems to be it. I think a lot of people, it's kind of like Bitcoin is their first love, and just like their first love, they have all these kinds of like misconceptions of like what the perfect magic of a relationship is like or whatever, and they just like because Bitcoin worked very well, and it was create the immaculate conception, right? Satoshi just came from the sky, and then there you go. Like the real person who Satoshi was, or the group of people, ooh, who cares about that? Yeah, we don't like to know if it's Craig Wright or not. Sorry, I had to get that zinger in there somewhere, but
I think we know. I think we know.
yeah. So all that stuff, and it just there was enough usage, enough energy behind it that everything just sort of worked. And people are just saying, "Well, it worked for Bitcoin. Why can't it work for literally anything else that didn't have that absolute like lightning strikes once kind of social conditions, especially for everything to sort of work out?" And so, like Bitcoin kind of started decentralized and then became, like all the bells and whistles came after, and it just worked because there was enough attention and enough energy behind it. But with a lot of other things, like that's kind of way libraries started to work, and no one used it for like years, and then they started putting in a couple training wheels to then take off at a later date, and all of a sudden like the explosions there. So do you think that this is sort of an area where maybe you were too pure, like the market demanded, super pure, and then at some point ended up sort of hamstringing the business?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think so. But I mean, I wouldn't say 100% because we did learn, like,
Mm-hmm.
if you ever used OpenBazaar when we first started it, I mean, it's evolved like maybe two or three major times. Like, one, when we first started, it was just like it could only scale to a couple of people for the most part. And then when we got the VC money, we went back and rewrote it all, and we put it on IPFS,
Mm-hmm.
and that was a centralized search. So
Mm-hmm.
if you search for bikes, I mean, you had to do this like long crawl, would basically look across everybody on the network and like try and find bikes in real time. And that was just like so horrible, so painful. Like no one could find anything to buy.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were forced to say, look, the technology is not here yet.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so let's put the training wheels, like you say, on,
Yeah.
and we'll create this search engine, and they'll just have to assume it's centralized. But we kind of twisted it a little bit, and we said, well, if that's where we have to go, let's at least make it federated. Let's at
Mm-hmm.
least make it so that other people could also provide this service, sort of like uh, Pirate Bay. It's
Mm-hmm.
like Pirate Bay is not the only option to go and find torrents, for BitTorrent. Like anybody can create an indexer and a service, and it's all compatible, right? And so that was kind of the theory behind it. It was like, is there some kind of compromise that's like good enough but not quite fully centralized? Like we wouldn't be like the only, like if tomorrow Obi-Wan died, could people spin up a new search service? Yes, and they could continue. So it's possible. It's not easy, but it is possible. So that was kind of like the compromise we made.
Yeah. Now, do you think that something like this, that maybe the path forward is trying to kind of pushing it out to more of the greater community and less of a Obi-Wan stewarded project? So, for example, each coin's community should probably figure out how they're going to host the infrastructure for each node, right? Like, if Litecoin wants to be enabled on there, if they even care, then they should probably be kicking some money towards that. If that there isn't any money for that, then it just goes down. Sorry, like
I mean,
some.
to be fair, the communities for the most part have been pretty open to things similar to that. I mean, not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily just like straight up funding things, but like willing to try and at least have the conversation of like, how can we support you and stuff. I mean, I went out to Vegas and did the Litecoin conference there because they were really supportive when we added Litecoin,
Mm-hmm.
that, and they gave me the opportunity to talk to that community and really try and promote it. And they've been really solid, and they've contributed some of the donations as well. And also Bitcoin has always been really, really good to us. And
Mm-hmm.
Zuko at Zcash has always been super supportive. I mean, he reached out like personally and was like, I just want to keep this thing going. Like I believe in it so much.
Yeah.
He's been really great. He's awesome. And so I would say that they support that. But the thing is like they also can't be expected to just fully drive all of that, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
they're like it's just support, and so we don't expect like, you know, say Zuko to come in and be like, "Oh yeah, I'll fund everything for you guys." Like that just not it's not reasonable. I
Mm-hmm.
think the community as a whole has to come together and want it to exist. I mean, we're willing to work on it and build it. Um, and to be honest, I mean, I've spent more of my life and a lot of my money too on top
Mm-hmm.
of things to like do all this because I ran all of it before we ever got funding, and uh, and so we've poured everything we have into it, and this is just kind of the part where it's like, okay, do you guys appreciate this? Do you want us to keep doing this? Like, where do you want this to see this go if we
Mm-hmm.
do it? Like, we don't want to just keep wandering aimlessly, and like if people want to see a web-based version, then that's a possible direction, or like if they like Haven and that's what they really want to use, then we'll do that. But regardless, like at this point we're willing to just open source everything we've built, put it all out there, and try to make sure that whatever we've done over the last 5 6 years is utilized to its fullest extent, no matter where it goes.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. Well, this has been a very enlightening chat. Where would you want to direct people who want to get involved, either for development or to donate or just to kind of find out more and start using?
If you want to learn more about OpenBazaar, openbazaar.org is like, kind of our developer and main site.
Hmm.
You can find out where to donate on there, as well as openbazaar.com. And you don't have to download anything. You can go and see what's on the network and decide for yourself if you want to like install the apps.
Hmm.
So those are the two main places. And then on Twitter, you can find me, and I'm usually talking nonsense, but sometimes there's a interesting nugget or two.
Yeah.
Brian B. Hoffman on Twitter.
Yeah, all right. Thanks. Well, fantastic. This is a great one, and I hope you have a great rest of the day.
Yeah, thanks, you too.